I'm going to give you what I think that Joe Biden's slogan should be. You ready? Joe Biden, because it's time for a change.
Warning. The political trade features probabilities and perspectives about politicians, political parties, political outcomes, and political wagering. The political trade is rated NSFP, not safe for partisans.
The number one biggest game is when they gain number fame. It's like a race at the top because they want to be boss. They don't care who they step on as long as they get along. Politicians in my eyes.
Welcome back to The Political Trade, the podcast for people with a passion for politics, probability, and profits. I'm Jeff Joseph, editorial director of Luckbox magazine, hosting the podcast where conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, partisans and wingnuts all come together to make money betting on politics by trading in the prediction markets at PredictIt.org, the stock market for politics that trades 24/7. And what a show we have today. We're so happy to have esteemed Democratic political strategist James Carville. And in just a moment, James will be joining us today from his farm in Virginia to talk about politics. And in our final segment, we'll be asking him for his perspective on specific predicted markets. So to get the most out of this podcast, you should open up PredictIt.org, click on the Markets tab, which is top left, follow along, and leave your political ideologies at the door because James Carville is in the house. And as always, I'm joined by Mike Ruddy. Mike is an editor at Luckbox magazine, a new prediction market trader, and the producer of The Political Trade. Mike, what do you have to share with us today?
Well, Jeff, we have a little bit of news to share, another peek behind the political trade curtain. First and foremost, we have listeners in all 50 states, and we have listeners in 73 different countries. So a lot of different people from a lot of different places.
Wonderful. That's great to hear.
Yeah, another bit of news that we have a brand new promotion that we're running tied into Luckbox magazine. So everyone knows that we have a promotion where you can get a free 10-issue digital subscription of the magazine at getluckbox.com. And that's all well and fine, but people want to have something physical that they can put on their coffee table and show off to their friends and family. And for a limited time, we're actually starting a new promotion where if you email a screenshot of a review that you wrote on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, any one of the platforms, we'll send you a complimentary print issue of Luckbox, and that is a $7.99 value. So go ahead and write a review, take a screenshot, email it to us at tpt@luckboxmagazine.com, and we'll get back to you with how to take advantage of this special offer.
Well, that's a great offer because we did cancel newsstand distribution this month for Luckbox magazine because there's no newsstand distribution. So our print magazines are only going out to those print subscribers, and to offer free issues to some of our listeners is a great idea.
Worth noting, Jeff, if you get the current issue that we're sending out right now, it features the story, the profile of the Hard Factor News team and their predicted prowess. So it's a great issue to take advantage of.
Absolutely. So they just simply send an email to what address?
tpt@luckboxmagazine.com. Just include a screenshot of your review and we'll make sure you get your issue of the magazine.
Terrific. So how about it today, James Carville? So James, of course, is a longtime political consultant and media personality who initially gained his national attention for the work he did as the lead strategist for the successful presidential campaign of Bill Clinton, who was then, of course, Arkansas governor. And Carville's gone on to co-host CNN's Crossfire beginning way back in 2002 and subsequently became a Fox News contributor, now an MSNBC contributor. In addition to currently co-hosting the 2020 Politics War Room podcast with Elle Hunt, James teaches communications at LSU on the use of emotion in political movements. What a perfect man for it. So how lucky are those students? Huh?
Well, very lucky. And certainly James knows the PredictIt platform. He's quoted on it. And I'm really looking forward to hearing his thoughts on some of these markets.
Well, then let's bring him on. James, are you with us?
I'm here. Check out the last words of Gary Wayne Gilmore and who he was. Gary Wayne Gilmore was the first person executed after the Supreme Court reinstituted executions. And he was died by firing squad in Utah, and asked him if he had any last words, and he said, "Just do it."
Just do it.
Okay, so we're the Gary Wayne Gilmore people. Just do it.
Well, that's a hell of an introduction for us. We're
There we
ready
go.
to do it. And thanks for coming on. I have to tell you, I'm a big fan. I listen regularly to 2020 War Room Politics,
Well, thank you.
the podcast that you do with Elle Hunt. You have great guests. It's short and sweet, and I love it. I was listening this past weekend, and you had Madam Secretary Madeleine Albright on, and
Right.
and at one point you mentioned to her that she's the only person that you feel really intimidated about speaking to at times and having her on the podcast. And it just caused me to think that I think I share that same intimidation having you on our show. But then I remembered, I did remember that you did lose the debate to Will Ferrell in Old School.
That's correct.
So, yeah, so it made me feel a little bit better to move on with you. So where are you held up right now, James? Where I understand you're in Virginia. Whereabouts?
I am in this northern Shenandoah Valley in a place called Morristown, Virginia, which, if you're familiar with the Shenandoah Valley, let's say it's between Strasburg and Woodstock, or the two largest cities between would be Winchester and Harrisonburg.
Are you otherwise down at the campus, down at LSU?
No, my wife she was here. She's in Old Town. She's in Virginia also with her friend, and she's doing some work there. She'll be back out here probably midweek. And I have one daughter who's in Lower Manhattan, and another who's actually my place in Mississippi, which is right across the state line from Louisiana. It's in the New Orleans metropolitan area. So we're scattered, but so far we're doing pretty well.
Well, one of the interesting things about what you're doing right now, in addition to the time you spend with MSNBC as a contributor and the podcast with Elle Hunt, is that you joined the faculty of LSU's the
Right.
Manship School of Mass Communication back in
Yes.
January last year. And you teach an LSU class on how to use emotion to advance social and political causes, right?
Right. I do. Actually, I've been there. It's my third year, but I started in higher ed. My background at Northern Virginia Community College, and when I moved to New Orleans, I spent 9 years as a professor at Tulane, and 3 years ago, I guess it was, I should be coming on 4. My daughter went to LSU, and so I decided that I would teach at LSU in the hopes that I would see more of her. But I'm teaching at LSU, I don't see more of her. I think I should. Plenty of people could have told me that ahead of time, but I'm sorry. But I like it there. It's good.
When we mentioned to our listeners that you were going to be on our show, of course, we got dozens of emails, and one of them that was timely. I'll just ask you that question right off the bat. It comes from Vig Tharmaraja, who's in Queens, New York, and he noted that Queens, with the highest number of confirmed COVID cases of any
Right.
U.S. county or borough thus far, according to Johns Hopkins, wanted to know what you think Biden's strategy should be during the lockdown and quarantine to counter all the
Right.
Trump's airtime.
It's a great question. And first of all, his campaign has a minute and 40-second ad. Go look on Joe Scarborough's Twitter. Joe said it's the most devastating ad he'd seen, and I looked at it, and I like to argue with Joe about LSU and Alabama and we kind of tease each other, but I think he's on to something there. Biden, remember, Ron Klain, who is the Ebola czar, who works with Biden, posted a piece, I think, on January 18th. Biden himself posted a piece on January the 29th or 28th that ran in USA Today about the dangers of this COVID-19. He knows this stuff. You look at him in a debate, he would say, I would have had people on the ground in China. And the WHO, there was a kind of a lost 3 weeks in January. By January 29th, had issued an alert for a global pandemic. I don't know how much more forceful you can be than the word pandemic with global coming before it. That's about as bad as it can get. And I don't think that our government really acted until mid-March. And so now the excuse is all China all the time. Look, I'm not here. China is an adversary of the United States. I don't know of anybody who doesn't know that. But in this world, you have to deal with adversaries. Trump praised the Chinese and their president 15 times in January and February. I mean, that's all in the record. If anybody wants to to dig any deeper than this, the best thing I've seen is Glenn Kessler, who does the fact check for the Washington Post. He lays it out very, very, very well. But Biden, like, I think he's doing about what he can do. You know, maybe for right now, I would say, don't just stand there, do nothing, or do very little, I would say. And I think his kind of daily things are fine. I think there's some timing here, and I don't really have a complaint of what he's doing currently. Not that situation will change, and when the situation changes, he has to change.
Yeah, even with respect to your comments about China, that's something that Secretary Albright reiterated to you when you asked her that same question in your podcast.
Yes, and she was very clear. They're an adversary. They have some explaining to do. However, right now in a global pandemic, so we better, you know, what did Benjamin Franklin say? We best hang together because surely we'll all hang separately.
Well. Speaking about coming together, let's move over to the Democratic Party. A couple of months ago, you were openly critical of what appeared to be a fractured Democratic Party, particularly coming out of the Iowa caucus. In fact, here's a clip from that evening when you were speaking with Brian Williams on MSNBC.
What do you make of Joe Biden and his campaign?
He has had an honorable life in politics. All right, this is just not the time. And maybe he'll come back, but he's going to have a difficult time.
Spoken as a with true foresight, he has indeed come back, and so much supported by South Carolina Representative Jim Clyburn, third-ranking Democrat in the House. Right? Yeah, you said he saved the Democratic Party with that endorsement.
He did. Well, what we're headed toward, and if you go back and you look at my comments on after the South Carolina debate, with the scenario that seemed most likely at the time is Senator Sanders would get to Milwaukee with a plurality, not a majority of the delegates, which would have fractured the party terribly. Because what was likely to happen is on the second ballot, the superdelegates would line up behind Biden. And I was scared to death that was going to happen. And the only way after that, you know, going after Nevada was to really get forceful behind Biden in South Carolina. And they were looking for guidance, and Congressman Clyburn has a deep relationship with Democrats in that state, and not just African-American Democrats. If you talk to white Democrats, he's highly respected. And everybody was confused and scared. And on, I think it was the Thursday before the Saturday, he dropped the hammer. And understand what happened. With South Carolina, without Congressman Clyburn, Biden might have won by 5 points. Well, with him, he won by 30. Then all Democrats around the country, from Northern Virginia's suburban Democrats to Mississippi Delta Democrats to everywhere, said, okay, that's it, we're in. It was just one thing that just ignited this fire in the party, because the only thing, and I've been very consistent about this, and I think I've been very right, the only thing that Democrats care about is beating Trump. And if we get at that time, if we had some consensus that this was the person, then people said, I mean, if you go look at the Virginia numbers in Northern Virginia, I have a friend of mine whose wife is a chronic small giver. He said she'd given to 5 candidates, none of them Biden. And she got up the morning of the Virginia primary and says, I'm voting for Biden. And that was for no other reason than Biden. We had to rally around the flag. We had to have a nominee. And where we are today, where the Democratic Party is today, is in a much, much stronger position than it was the night of the Nevada caucuses. I promise you that.
After Super Tuesday, you called Clyburn's endorsement one of the most consequential endorsements in any presidential campaign ever.
I can't. It's hard to remember one that was more, because it set off a chain reaction.
Are you satisfied the party is back on track to achieve the Obama-Biden coalition of 2008, particularly among African American voters?
Well, I think we're going to expand. I mean, we're going to slaughter them with these suburban women. I mean, you just look at how they come out and look at the turnout, and look at where this is happening, and we picked up. Look at all the House gains we made in 2018. And the combination that I've been very clear on television is, basically that we are a party that has become a party of African Americans and educated white females. It constitute the biggest part of the base of the Democratic Party right now. Latinos for sure, but that's where the party is.
Yesterday, a New York Times article was titled "Vote for Biden. Sanders supporters say it's up in the air," and it was basically a recounting of some anecdotal stories of this kind of youthful, impassioned army of Sanders supporters that are kind of far from ready to embrace the nominee. And there's an enthusiasm gap out there that's been cited. You've been openly critical of the kind of the Sanders supporters, particularly the Twitter mob. Do you think they'll come in line?
That's a money question. All right, I thought the Times piece was not very good. I like that coverage for the most part. The idea that you talk to 5 people and now, having said that, it is a problem. And I mean, I see a lot of polls. I know a lot of posters, and there is a lag. If you do a national poll, what you'll generally find is that the Democratic congressional number is higher than the Biden number. And there is a part of Senator Sanders' support that has not moved to Biden. But I think his support for Biden is much more forceful than it was for Secretary Clinton. And I think you got to start working it. You got to acknowledge that. You want to bring the party together as much as you can. But the thing I would say here too is Democratic voters nominated Joe Biden by overwhelming margins. Senator Sanders had more money than any of the candidates. He had access to every debate. He was heavily covered. And certainly we have to respect their views. They're very passionate. But I would say concurrent with the respect that we have to have for their views, they have to respect the views of the overwhelming number of Democratic voters. So if you don't respect Democratic voters in Sunflower County, Mississippi, or Macomb County, Michigan, all right, or all over this country, then that Biden represents them in what they wanted in a candidate. And that's part of being in a political coalition. Now, some people don't want to be in a coalition. They want to be in a cult. All right? I disagree with your choice, but that's your choice. You have a right to be in a cult. But that's not how you acquire political power and change in this country. You do that through a coalition.
The ABC News Washington Post poll that Langer Research released late March showed strong enthusiasm for Biden is just at 24%. It was the lowest on record for any Democratic presidential candidate in 20 years of that poll. And it said that more than twice as many as those supporters are highly enthusiastic about Trump. And most notably, they said that 15% of Sanders supporters said they would back Trump over Biden in the fall. What's going on?
There's been a lot of subsequent polling. If you look at the NBC Wall Street Journal poll that was released yesterday, if you look at the very negatives, the very negative on Trump is like twice as it is on Biden. And by the way, we had a real-time experiment. It's called Wisconsin, all right? So we can go find a poll. Anybody, and I'm not being so critical here, anybody can find any poll that they want to make a point. Of course, all Trump does is feed his base. So if we spent all of our time feeding our base, then we probably would have a charged up base. We would lose all of the, we'd lose a lot of African Americans because time and time again, we have learned that they are very, very pragmatic voters. They're very skeptical of people coming in promising them, the moon and free this and everything else. That's not their deal. And these suburban women are not plugged into many of the ideas that some other part of the Democratic base has. But all Trump, and I don't want to be for a candidate that wants to be the head of a cult. I want a candidate that works hard, that likes politics, that builds coalitions. I mean, you look at all of the people that are succeeding, all of the governors, and they all have one thing in common. They're politicians. They know what's going on. Look at my governor, John Bell Edwards. He grew up in a political family. His daddy was the sheriff of a pretty significant parish in Louisiana. He went to West Point. He was the head of the Honors Council. He was an Army Ranger. He went to LSU Law School. He was the minority leader in the Louisiana legislature. He's now the governor, and a damn good one, and he's a politician. The same thing with Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo grew up in the most political house in the world. And when somebody comes up and saying, we don't need politicians, we need this. No, we need politicians, dude. That's exactly what we need right now. I'd say to the Sanders people, understand it's very difficult to lose an election. You worked really hard. And by the way, probably our 2024 nominee is going to be to the left of Sanders, the way this thing is going.
That's probably right. Well, you're right about Wisconsin being a real-time validation of the vote. I mean, they won by 10 or 11 points on that, despite Republican efforts to squash that election result, and a liberal Supreme Court justice, came away with surprise victory.
She was the personification of, she was from Madison, which, of course, is a red flag to people in rural Wisconsin. And she did decently up there. I mean, what happened is they were not that enthusiastic. From what people have, I've not got a good hard and cold analysis, but I've talked to some knowledgeable people, and they think a rough take on the returns is that they didn't get out to vote in rural Wisconsin. Look, if people are so enthusiastic about Trump, and that's something to be feared, well, how do you explain Kentucky and Louisiana? All right, in which Trump came in, and those are, and trust me, Trump is going to carry Louisiana, and Trump is going to carry Kentucky. But this is all, if you look at this thing in real time, in real election results, and if you look at 2018, where people say, yeah, James, but look, in 94, the Republicans killed Clinton when he was in office, and he came back and he won in 96. And yeah, James, the Republicans killed the Democrats in 2010, and Obama came back and won in 2012. That's a valid point, all right? And my answer to that is true. But 94 and 2010 were base elections. That is, that the Republican base in both instances was highly agitated and came out to vote against something, where the Democratic base was not so much. In 2018, the Republican base was highly, highly agitated and came out. They had really good turnout numbers. The Democrats had really good turnout numbers. Where did we win 2018? We won it in suburban Philadelphia. We won it in suburban South Carolina. We won it in suburban Atlanta, in suburban Houston, in suburban Dallas, in suburban Oklahoma City, in suburban Orange County. The difference was everybody was expecting a mano, my base is more enthusiastic than your base. And lo and behold, by recruiting qualified, diverse candidates that stuck to a simple, pragmatic, left-of-center message, we had the biggest turnout and the biggest margin in any congressional election since women were granted the right to vote. There is a lesson here. There is a big lesson. To me, it's very hard to just disregard this massive amount of evidence that is coming over the transit.
And that brings us to our last question before the break, and before we ask you about specific markets. You're famously known for your advice to Bill Clinton in 1992. H.W. Bush was riding high in opinion polls, but he wasn't during a recession. And of course, you articulated, it's the economy, stupid. There's a little bit more to it. In the Little Rock campaign headquarters, you had a sign posted, change versus more of the same.
Right.
It's the economy, stupid.
Stop that first one. I'm going to give you what I think that Joe Biden's slogan should be. You ready? Drum roll, please.
I'm ready.
You ready? Joe Biden, because it's time for a change. It's not created. It's been used before. Right now, the biggest word you can have is change. And why do I like just the word change? Because you can interpret yourself what it means. So to some people, it would be, I think change from the corruption is the number one thing it should be, but other people might think the number one thing of that is you got to have more aggressive climate policy. Other people will think you got to have a more expansive social safety net. Other people will think your change means a change in demeanor. It doesn't matter. It is a word. It's a great word. It's been around since ancient Greece. I don't know how you say it in Greek, but I guarantee you when somebody was running against the incumbent, they said it's time for a change. And so that's my advice, my macro advice, everything's right. Joe Biden, because it's time for a change.
Well, we're going to come right back after a quick break, and we're going to ask you specific questions about specific markets and get your perspective. We'll be right back, but first.
Want a little more luck in your life? Get Luckbox, the control freak's guide to life, money, and probability, named the best new magazine of 2019. Luckbox is a must-read for side hustlers, gamblers, entrepreneurs, and active investors. Each issue features best bets from prediction market experts, as well as timely sports wagering, stocks, options, futures, and cryptocurrency trading ideas. You can buy Luckbox on newsstands, but with this special offer, listeners of The Political Trade can receive a 10-issue digital subscription absolutely free. Just visit getluckbox.com to receive the award-winning magazine right in your inbox. Don't rely on luck. Get Luckbox for free today. Learn more at getluckbox.com.
Welcome back to this special episode of The Political Trade with James Carville. James, are you much of a gambling man?
I am. There are very few vices that I do not have. And so if you picked a vice, you would be very, very, if you bet on James and the vice, you're going to win a lot more than you're going to lose. We'll just leave it at that without getting specific. But I'm a man of many vices, gambling being one. I don't consider gambling a vice, by the way. I consider it a joy.
I hear you, and that you're going to be well received by our listeners, who are, for the most part, are trading the political prediction markets, and some of them do it for a living, some of them do it for part-time income. But that's where we're going to get to right now. You're actually quoted on the PredictIt website on the homepage. You say it's the most exciting engine in terms of political opinion. So we're going to jump right in and ask you specific questions about some of these markets.
Sure.
Okay. So which party will win the U.S. Senate election in Kentucky in 2020? Let me give you the background. Currently, the Republicans are trading at 84 cents. So the Democrats are around 16 cents as to which party will win the U.S. Senate election. Of course, Mitch McConnell was elected in 1984 as the longest serving U.S. Senator in Kentucky history. But I know you have some feelings about things changing in Kentucky.
But first of all, but disclosure, I am the co-chairman of the Ditch Mitch Super PAC. All right. And I was very close to Governor Beshear's campaign, and his campaign manager running the Ditch Mitch. So in terms of the Senate, let's think overall, all right? Let's do tiers where we're looking for a price, all right? The top tier for Democratic pickups are North Carolina, Arizona, Colorado, and Maine, all right? For right now, any value you can get in any one of those fours, I would take it. Tier 2 would be Montana at the kind of top of tier 2. Iowa, definitely in the hunt at the top of tier 2. Kansas might be something if you get a good price, because remember, Kansas has a Democratic governor and that COVID could be back. So there's some value there. There's value in Georgia. There's value in Texas. There's also some, if you got a good enough price in Alabama, I might. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. South Carolina, whatever happens, I think the Democrat Senate candidate in South Carolina will get a higher percentage than Kentucky.
A high percentage with the Republicans the Democrats at 16 to 18 cents. Do you think that's a worthwhile long shot?
In South Carolina?
I'm sorry, in Kentucky.
That's going to be tough, but that's a pretty good price. You know, I'd take it because you might be able to trade it down the line. But I'd have to have good value. And believe me, I'm chairman of the thing. I'm raising money to beat Mitch McConnell, but I also, I think there's some value there for a while. But I'd look at those top tier states and then the second tier states and try to flush it out from there.
Okay, so let's go deeper into those. In Tier 1, you have North Carolina, Arizona, Colorado, and Montana. So let's
no. Montana's at the top of Tier 2.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maine is Tier 1. Maine. Yeah, and I would bet heavily on the hold in Michigan.
In Michigan, yeah.
Yeah, the Democratic Senator Peters. I'd take him pretty good.
Okay, so that's Republican John James versus incumbent Democratic Gary Peters, who's the junior senator there who won Carl Levin's seat. So James is an Iraqi war veteran, has been outraising Peters this year so far. Peters is winning, though, in mid-single digits in each poll. There's been 3 polls since the top of the year. And right now in that market, the Democrats are at 68 cents, up about a penny on the day. Republicans at 33 cents. So Peters, the Democrat at 68 cents, you like that?
I like that. I do.
All right. So that is noted. And that's in Michigan. So speaking of the takeaways, just to back up a little bit, the Democrats need to win 4 seats that are now held by Republicans without losing any that they're defending, and that's for outright control of the Senate. You think that's within reach? Here's the current pricing is the Republicans to take control of the Senate are at 59 cents, Democrats 41 cents.
I would take the 41. Look, this is my general view. I approach this the same way you approach a bracketology in a tournament. They're kind of the way you can win is you got to say, look, I'll take a 4 seed or a 3 seed and have it all the way to the championship game. Well, if that happens, you're in pretty good shape. Because you started with a philosophy that, look, who's going to win the Belmont Northwestern State game? Who knows? But if you say, I think Kansas is the team and I'm going to ride them all the way, you're going to accumulate a lot of points. If you look at this and you say, look, I'm seeing convergence around somewhere between 44 and 45 for the Republicans, then you can figure that into your larger model as to what that will produce. The chances that, and a lot of people, like some of the Bernie people, they may vote for a Green candidate, but they also would vote for a Democratic Senate candidate if they don't have a choice. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Spoken like a true gambler.
Yeah, you got to factor third party into your choices. And the more, if you get a Green party, that's not good. If you get a Libertarian party, that's better. You're going to get a lot of different stuff, but that's going to affect you on the margin. But right now, I think you can be pretty confident plugging in 44 and a half for the Trump number, or 45 just to make it simple. So that means that 55 is going to be between Biden and the accumulated third party vote. And right. What you're trying to do is go back historically and see what the accumulated third party vote. I think it's going to be less because I just think that the desire to beat Trump is people are going to get, one thing's going to happen is a lot of people that say a lot of people, left people that say I'm not voting for Biden because it's this, they're going to have a lot of peer pressure. It's not like people are not going to say, you crazy? People are going to be mad.
Well, James, you bring up the third-party candidacy. So using your model here to factor in the impact of a third party, and you brought up the Libertarian candidate. So that's one of the markets at PredictIt is will Justin Amash declare a run for presidency before 6/1, June 1st. The yeses are at 39 cents right now. He's, of course, the independent Michigan representative, a libertarian, consistent Trump critic. That's traded between 39 and 50. And what do you think? Last election, the Gary Johnson Weld ticket had just shy of 5 million votes, which was 3 times the previous record for a third party. So do you think we're going to see much of a third party showing this year?
I think that it's likely. And everybody has to figure that in. You have your 45 calculation. as of now. That's, and that number could, but it hadn't fluctuated very much. I mean, the polling here is unbelievably consistent over a period of time. I mean, it just really is. And the election returns are unbelievably consistent. And even if you look at Heidi and Claire, Senator Heidkamp or Senator McClassell, or even Senator Donnelly in Indiana, in those places where we lost, we ran significantly ahead of 2016 Democratic performance. So even where you have actual election results, you can figure that into your calculation. But you got to figure the third party into your calculation. You got to sit down, look historically, and try to figure out how that's going to affect your model and what that'll produce. It won't produce much on the congressional side, on the Senate side. It could produce something in terms of states that get carried or not.
Do you think Amash runs?
I don't have any particular inside knowledge, but he seems to be highly motivated and seems like he can't stand Trump. And I think, just based on observing him at a distance, if he thinks his running for the Libertarian would help defeat Trump, I think he would do it.
And he's a yes at 39 cents right now.
I wouldn't go big, but it might be I would make it a kind of a value fund play.
Kind of a quiet bell here then. All right. Well, you mentioned, I know a race that you follow closely is Montana, because I love my sense is that you've been a big fan of Bullock.
I have.
And so let's look at that race right now. So which party will win the U.S. Senate election in Montana? The Republicans are at 55. Of course, that's Steve Daines, who's currently the senator. And this is Governor Steve Bullock, who's been neck and neck in polling for that Senate seat that Daines holds right now. 55 cents for the Republicans, 46 cents for the Democrats. Do you have a call here?
Yeah, I think the race is no worse than 50-50, so there's some value. I mean, if you got to be at the margins here. I think the price that's reflected is reasonable, but I think there's some value, and I'll be very upfront. I'm a friend of his. I'm going to hold a fundraiser for him in New Orleans. I don't know how the hell we're going to, this is going to work out going forward. I really like Montana Democrats. I like Senator Tester. Mike Mansfield is probably the best resume of anybody in the 20th century. If you don't believe me, just look him up in the Wikipedia. Was it Lee Metcalf? I've been up there and spoken at the Democratic fundraisers, and I just have a soft spot. And Jim Messina is a dear friend of mine, but I'm not letting emotion control. I think 45 is a decent price for Governor Bullock.
So the next market, James, is will the Democratic Party hold its convention at Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee? And what that really is asking, what the market rules are stating, will the Democratic nominee for president accept the nomination from the stage at the Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee by November 1st? It's kind of a specialty bet. The latest is 29 cents for a yes and 73 cents for a no. It's really a question. Do you think there'll be a convention?
I kind of like the yes here. All right. Look, there's not going to be a convention in the sense that you're going to have 4,100 delegates and, the Minnesota delegation and, the Delaware delegation having the prime spot, anything like that. But what you may have, and it can be later, maybe, testing ramps up. I mean, you're kind of betting on it coming a little bit here. So you may send representatives of delegations. So maybe California will send 30 to represent, which will reflect, the 30 would reflect what California does. So you would institute social distancing. You would, people would wear masks. But I think that the party will go to pretty good lengths, consistent with public health, to do something like this. So I understand that people say no, but maybe they have to do it in October the 5th. But you want that opportunity. Because you get all the attention, it gives people a boost, and people will watch it. You got to figure out a clever way to do it, and I'm not sure that that they're not going to figure something out. They're going to work really hard trying to do it. And at 29 cents, I would take it.
Good
Now,
price.
again,
All
it's
right.
not going to be a convention like you're accustomed to. I'm pretty sure of that. But they just say convention. Well, if they call it a convention and it happens in Milwaukee, then you won your bet.
That's right. Next question. Will the winner of the popular vote also win the Electoral College? That's been in a tight range between 73 and 66 cents. As you know, 5 times in U.S. presidential history, the winner
Right.
lost the popular vote, most recently Trump and Bush, but going back to John Quincy Adams, Hayes, Harrison.
There's a cottage industry out there, and the Times does a lot of this, but other people do. They get some Senate polls, or they get, and then they tease out a thing, and then they say, well, here's a scenario where the Democrats could win the popular vote by 7 and lose it. And all of them are pretty far-fetched. If you plug in the Carville, consensus 44.5 to 45 number, you're going to win the popular vote. I mean, you're going to win the Electoral College. If you get it close to the 66, take it. It's going to be very difficult to replicate 2016, I think.
All right. Well, I'm really anxious to hear your thoughts on this market. Clemency in Trump's first term. And to be clear, the question is, will a clemency occur for any of the underlying people before February 15th? So that technically is after the election, right? And there's three markets, one for Stone, one for Flynn, one for Manafort. Stone's at 57 or 67 cents, which is the highest probability according to the predicted market. Flynn is at 54 cents. Manafort is at 33 cents.
I would take clemency on all of them, because if you take the Carville model, he's going to lose the election, and when he leaves, it is not going to be pretty. All right. I mean, imagine how crazy he is now that he's in office. Can you imagine? I'm using this for a point of personal privilege here. It's not just enough to beat Trump, right? On election night, he's got to look like a beaten army. So I watch a lot of these documentaries and, this and that. And I was watching a good documentary on the Battle of Stalingrad. He's got to look like those German soldiers at the end of January 1942. Beaten, starving, freezing, no hope. It's got to be that kind of a beating. And once you do that, and we can do that, we can have a big year. And so he will pardon, God knows what he's going to do on the way out. He definitely would pardon all three of those. So if
Joe Exotic too?
Yeah, you could. If you plug in, if I'm right on my 45, and that number is subject to change. So, they asked John Maynard Keynes said, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do? Right? This is the facts as I see them today. Well, we might do the show in September, and I have a different model. But right now, I think there's value in the 45 model.
All right. That's Stone, Flynn, and Manafort. Yes. And maybe the Tiger King, Joe Exotic, would be on that list as well. So, the last market we're going to ask you about is the big market. And then we're going to let you go, and really appreciate the time you spent with us. But it's Democratic VP. And it's certainly the market that is generating the most interest right now on PredictIt. Harris is the front runner at 28 cents, Klobuchar at 24 cents, then Warren at 16 cents. And I recall you saying of Warren that she has the best bio of any presidential candidate. And then Whitmer's behind her. And then there's some single-digit people like Stacey Abrams, Michelle Obama at 8 cents, and Catherine Cortez Masto at 7 cents. So I'm looking for your favorite selection and a long shot selection.
But the long shot selection is Masto's. That's well priced at 7%. You want that.
At 7 cents?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Mastro's she's senior U.S. senator from Nevada since 2017. She's got Harry Reid's seat right now, the first Latina elected to serve in the Senate, and Biden reportedly said only a couple of weeks ago that she was in his top 3.
Yeah, I mean, at 7 cents, that's the biggest value I see. And by the way, if she starts getting mentioned, and then et cetera, that 7 cents is going to go to 36 cents. At that point, you may want to sell. I mean, but when I'm saying there's value at 7 cents, that doesn't mean that I think she's 50-50. I just think she's a hell of a lot better than 7 cents.
Spoken like a true trader. That's absolutely right.
The problem with Warren is this. If he picks her, there's a Republican governor. Now, they have to have an election, but it takes 4 or 5 months to do that. And do you want to risk? And I was very big for Warren, for Hillary. I didn't carry the day, as I didn't carry a lot of days there. But I thought that she would have been a really good pick for Hillary for a lot of reasons. I really started out, I'm kind of a big admirer of hers. I'm not a very big admirer of the campaign she ran for president. But I wish that she would, resign her Senate seat in the future and hold it to a vote. And I don't know how you could do it, but Baker, they got to have every Democratic senator they can at the beginning of the term, because that's when you got to get everything done. I think that argues against Warren on that one factor. Not impossible. I wouldn't say it's impossible. They couldn't work something out, but I think she's the best value bet on the whole board.
Right. It's highly likely that the Massachusetts Republican governor is going to appoint a Republican to fill her seat if she was given the nomination. Yeah. So what about the front runners, Harris and Klobuchar?
I mean, I think there very much can be in the top tier. I mean, certainly there's going to be people they're going to look at. I take one up. I just think Mastos has all the value right now. And the other thing let me tell you another possibility to look at. There's no market for it yet. One of these freshman Democratic House members, say Spanberger, Mickey Sherrill. I mean, they really, really kind of qualified, women and, younger. I wouldn't take them I'd need better value than 7 cents, but if it ever comes on the market, and you really want to take a flyer, that might be worth something.
What do you think the probability that it would not be a African American woman? Would that be a rebuke to Clyburn in terms of him pretty much making it clear that he thought?
Look, you know what? I think if you, and I'm just extrapolating, if I went to Congressman Clyburn, Terry Richmond was a really good friend of mine, and I said, look, we could, I know this for a fact, we could pick an African American, or we could pick something else. It probably picking a Caucasian will increase our chances of winning by 1%. People say, let's just get this guy out of here, And maybe it makes sense. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, because African Americans are really fundamentally strategically located in places like North Carolina, in places like Georgia, in places like Texas, in places like Alabama, particularly in the Doug Jones Senate race. So, and in places like Pennsylvania. So that their distribution is much better than, say, the distribution of the Bernie Bros, who tend to be more urban and coastally situated. So, but I don't think there's going to be. I think people want to win. I don't think there's so much looking for, and I think the primaries prove that. I mean, how many times do people have to say, we don't give a crap about anything else other than beating this career criminal? And I think that is an accurate reflection of a large part of the African American community, particularly the older African Americans. I think some of the younger might be a little more ideologically motivated. But I'm not motivated by one. I only have one motivation, and that's getting this guy out of there, and not just beating him like a beaten army, right? Like the troops are starving. When Lee surrendered, his troops were starving, and Grant gave him 20,000 rations. That's a kind of beaten thing. I want to see this signed on the deck of the battleship Missouri.
If that's the outcome, boy, your clemency bets sure look good. I'll tell you that much. I understand that reasoning. James, you have been awesome to have. We're so happy to have you spend your time with us. And I'm going to take you up on something you said, mentioning coming back. We'd love to maybe get you back in September. And
Sure, I'll love to. And I'll have to clean up everything I said, I'm sure. But let's see where we are in September. And if I got to clean it up, I'll clean it up. I'll tell you, when the facts change, I change my mind. Right now, I've given you as accurate of idea of what I think the facts are, and I think Mastos is a really good bet at 7.
I think so. All right, and we'll take a look. And I invite everybody to listen to 2020 Politics War Room with Al Hunt and James Carville, wherever you listen to podcasts. James, thank you so much again. It's great to have you on.
You bet.
Mike, is there anything else that you want to remind our listeners before we wrap this up?
Sure. Well, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not already signed up on PredictIt, you are in luck. You can take advantage of the tactics and trades shared by our super trader guests or the insight by our special guests like James Carville by going to predictit.org/promo/TPT20. You sign up, deposit $20, and we'll match that first $20 investment that you deposit. It's predictit.org/promo/TPT20. Deposit 20, and you'll have 40 to trade with. It's that simple. Don't just listen to the political trade. Sign up and trade along.
Thanks, Mike. And do send us our reviews, as Mike mentioned at the top of the segment. So thanks again to our listeners for tuning into the political trade. This is Jeff Joseph.
And I'm Mike Reddy.
Remember to listen to 2020 Politics War Room with James Carville and Al Hunt. And of course, wash your hands, social distance, stay healthy, and join us next week on the political trade.